For centuries, the question of what happens after death has remained one of humanity's greatest mysteries. Some believe in spiritual ascension, others in nothingness, and many cling to their own cultural or religious interpretations. But what if there was a way to observe the unobservable, to peer into the unknown? A group of pioneering scientists sought to answer that question with a bold experiment. Led by Dr. Sophia Reed, a biophysicist with a reputation for pushing the boundaries of science, the team proposed an idea that sparked both curiosity and controversy: to place a high-resolution camera inside a coffin during a burial. The goal wasn't morbid fascination. It was a pursuit of knowledge. This is about understanding the processes and changes that occur after burial, Dr. Reed explained during a press conference. It's not about fear or superstition. It's about science. Despite their intentions, the project faced harsh criticism from religious leaders and ethical committees. Many argued that the experiment was invasive and disrespectful. But one man, David Miller, a terminally ill historian, volunteered to take part in the study, saying, "If this can bring answers to questions we've had for centuries, then I'm willing to be a part of it." David, a man who had spent his life unraveling the mysteries of the past, was now prepared to help uncover one of humanity's ultimate mysteries. The agreement was finalized, and the coffin was equipped with a tiny, state-of-the-art camera capable of transmitting a live feed. As David's burial day approached, the tension in the lab grew. The team knew they were about to venture into uncharted territory. On the day of David Miller's burial, a somber mood hung in the air. His family and friends gathered at the cemetery, their faces etched with grief, but also a quiet resolve to honor his wishes. The scientists stood at a respectful distance, blending into the crowd as the ceremony proceeded. For them, this was more than an experiment. It was a moment of profound human connection and discovery. David's coffin, crafted simply yet with care, was lowered into the ground. Hidden inside was the advanced camera, no larger than a coin, discreetly installed to avoid disrupting the solemnity of the occasion. Its lens was positioned to capture every detail of what would happen once the soil covered the casket. As the first shovel of earth landed on the coffin, the sound was picked up by the camera's sensitive microphone. Back in the lab, the live feed transmitted a view of the coffin's interior, bathed in the faint green glow of night vision. The scientists watched silently, their faces illuminated by the flickering monitors. At first, there was nothing, just the stillness of the wood, the silence of the earth, and the faint sound of soil settling. Hours passed, and the team began to relax, logging their observations. No activity detected. The coffin remained undisturbed, its contents unchanged. "It's exactly what we expected," one technician said, leaning back in his chair. But Dr. Reed, ever vigilant, kept her eyes on the screen. "Don't get comfortable," she murmured. "This is only the beginning." At the 6-hour mark, the silence was broken. A faint sound, almost imperceptible, emanated from the speakers. It was soft, rhythmic, and deliberate, like the tapping of fingers against wood. The team froze, their eyes darting to the monitor. The camera feed remained unchanged, showing nothing but the still, empty interior of the coffin. Yet the tapping continued, growing slightly louder. "Is that settling sounds?" one of the researchers whispered nervously. Dr. Reed shook her head, her expression unreadable. "It's too rhythmic to be random. Amplify the audio." The technician adjusted the controls, and the tapping became clearer. It wasn't chaotic. It was deliberate, almost like a message. The team exchanged uneasy glances, the air in the lab growing heavier with every passing second. They had expected the silence of death, not this faint, haunting rhythm. The tapping persisted, its rhythm steady and deliberate. The scientists sat frozen, their attention fixed on the monitor. The faint green glow of the camera illuminated the coffin's interior, showing nothing out of the ordinary. Yet the sound was undeniable. It wasn't erratic or random, it had a pattern, almost like someone or something was trying to communicate. "Let's isolate the sound," Dr. Reed instructed, her voice calm but firm. The technician filtered the audio feed, removing background noise. The tapping grew even clearer, each knock distinct and precise. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. "What does that mean?" a young researcher asked, his voice trembling. "It's too structured to be natural," Dr. Reed replied. "But without movement, we can't identify the source." As they debated, another sound emerged, a faint scratching noise like fabric brushing against wood. The scientists leaned in closer, their hearts racing. The audio feed picked up the subtle friction, the sound growing louder before stopping abruptly. The team exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier confidence shaken. Back at the cemetery, the wind rustled the trees, creating an eerie calm. David's family had long since departed, leaving the grave undisturbed. Underground, however, the stillness seemed to conceal something far more complex. The camera feed remained unchanged, but the audio told a different story. And then, at the 8-hour mark, a new sound filled the speakers. It was faint, almost imperceptible at first, but unmistakable. A low, rhythmic vibration. The team froze, their eyes widening as the sound grew clearer. It wasn't mechanical or environmental, it was organic, almost like a heartbeat. "That can't be right," one technician muttered, frantically checking the equipment. "The system is working perfectly," another replied, his voice laced with disbelief. "This is coming from the Coffin." Dr. Reed leaned closer to the monitor, her expression unreadable. "Run a frequency analysis," she instructed. As the technician complied, the vibration stopped, replaced by silence. The team sat motionless, waiting for something to happen. Minutes passed, and the tension in the room became unbearable. Just as they began to relax, the camera feed flickered. "What was that?" someone asked, panic creeping into their voice. The screen stabilized, revealing a faint disturbance in the corner of the coffin. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the scientists noticed it immediately. The fabric lining the coffin had shifted slightly, as though moved by an unseen force. "Rewind the footage," Dr. Reed ordered, her tone sharp. The team replayed the last few minutes, studying every frame. The disturbance was clear, an unexplained movement, small but deliberate. The air in the lab grew heavy as the realization sank in. Something inside the coffin had moved. Dr. Reed straightened, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "Document everything. We're not done yet." The lab was silent, save for the faint hum of the equipment and the occasional sound of keys clicking as the team logged their findings. All eyes remained fixed on the monitor, watching for even the slightest change. The disturbance in the coffin's fabric, though subtle, had shifted the atmosphere in the room from scientific curiosity to uneasy anticipation. As the camera zoomed in on the affected area, the fabric seemed perfectly still once more. The green glow of the night vision illuminated every detail, the smooth wood of the coffin, the neatly arranged lining, and the untouched stillness of the scene. Yet, the team couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening just beyond their perception. Could it be air pockets, movement from the soil? One of the researchers suggested, though their tone betrayed their doubt. Dr. Reed shook her head. "There's no airflow in a sealed coffin, and soil pressure wouldn't cause this kind of precise disturbance. This is something else." As they debated, the audio feed picked up a new sound. It was faint, almost like a whisper, though no words could be discerned. The scientists leaned closer to the speakers, straining to make sense of the noise. It wasn't static, nor was it interference. It was low, rhythmic, and strangely melodic, like a tone being played on a distant instrument. "What is that?" one technician asked, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the controls. Dr. Reed's brow furrowed in concentration. "Amplify it. Let's isolate the frequencies." The sound became clearer, though still indecipherable. It pulsed gently, each note blending into the next in a pattern that felt deliberate, almost purposeful. The tone seemed to resonate with something deep and instinctual, a feeling that defied explanation, but could not be ignored. As the team analyzed the sound, the camera feed flickered again. This time it wasn't just a brief interruption. The screen went dark for a full second before the image returned, revealing something that made everyone freeze. The fabric lining the coffin had shifted further, now pulled tightly into one corner. It was as if an invisible force had deliberately gathered it. Around the edges, faint impressions were visible, like the outline of fingers pressing against the material. "Is that—" one of the researchers began, but they couldn't finish the sentence. Dr. Reed leaned closer, her voice calm but firm. "Everyone stay focused. We need to document this carefully." The impressions in the fabric remained for several seconds before slowly fading away, as though whatever had caused them had retreated. The room was tense, the air heavy with the weight of what they had just witnessed. It wasn't fear that gripped the scientists. It was the undeniable realization that they were observing something extraordinary. Dr. Reed finally spoke, her voice steady. "This isn't just about physical processes. We're witnessing something we can't yet explain, something that challenges everything we know." The team exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. The experiment had crossed into uncharted territory, and the boundaries between science and the unknown were beginning to blur. The impressions in the fabric were gone, but their presence lingered in the minds of the scientists. No one dared look away from the monitor, their eyes scanning for even the slightest movement. The rhythmic sound from the speakers returned, now clearer and more deliberate. It was no longer a random hum. It had structure, almost like a pattern or signal trying to emerge. Dr. Reed sat back, her mind racing. Whatever is happening, it's not random. It's controlled. Someone wants us to notice. One of the researchers hesitated, then asked the question on everyone's mind. But who? Or what? Before anyone could respond, the camera feed shifted subtly. The lens, though static in its position, seemed to catch a faint distortion, like a ripple in the air. It wasn't visible at first, but as the team adjusted the feed, they noticed it, a faint, golden glow radiating from the lower corner of the coffin. "What's causing that?" one technician asked, their voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Reed's gaze sharpened. "Enhance the feed. Focus on the source of the light." The camera zoomed in, revealing a corner of the coffin where the glow was strongest. At first, the light seemed random, a natural reflection or artifact of the camera. But as the team watched, the glow began to form shapes, lines, curves, and eventually symbols. The markings looked ancient, yet entirely unfamiliar, etched faintly into the wood of the coffin. Dr. Hayes, the team's linguistics expert, leaned closer to the monitor. "Those aren't hieroglyphs or any known ancient script. They're something else entirely." The glowing symbols pulsated gently, their light synchronizing with the rhythmic hum from the audio feed. The team watched in stunned silence as the symbols shifted and rearranged, forming what appeared to be a sequence. A message, though its meaning was unclear. "This is deliberate," Dr. Reed said, her voice filled with awe. "These symbols, they're reacting to something. To us, maybe." The hum grew louder, its vibrations resonating through the equipment. The glow intensified, casting faint reflections onto the walls of the lab. The symbols in the coffin became more complex, their patterns weaving together into a cohesive design. It was as though the coffin itself was a vessel, transmitting a message through layers of time. "What are we looking at?" a researcher asked, their voice trembling with a mix of fear and fascination. Dr. Hayes studied the symbols, his hands trembling as he took notes. "It's a code, a universal one designed to be understood by anyone who finds it, regardless of time or language. It's an invitation." The air in the lab grew heavy as the realization sank in. The coffin wasn't just a resting place, it was a medium, a conduit for something far greater than any of them had anticipated. As the symbols glowed brighter, they seemed to pulse in anticipation, as if waiting for a response. Dr. Reed took a deep breath, her voice steady but filled with gravity. "Whatever this is, it wasn't meant to stay buried. It's reaching out, to us." The symbols continued to glow, their patterns shifting and pulsing in perfect synchronization with the rhythmic hum. The lab was silent, save for the sound of the transmission and the faint clicks of keyboards as the team scrambled to record every detail. The atmosphere was heavy with the realization that they were witnessing something far beyond their initial hypothesis. Dr. Reed stood, her eyes fixed on the monitor. "This isn't just an artifact or a natural phenomenon. It's a communication. But from whom? And why?" As if in response to her words, the glow intensified. The symbols rearranged themselves into a circular pattern, each line and curve connecting to form a larger design. At the center of the circle, a new symbol emerged, larger, more intricate, and glowing brighter than the rest. It was unlike anything they had seen before, a blend of ancient geometry and modern precision. Dr. Hayes leaned forward, his voice barely audible. "It's pointing to something. This central symbol. It's a marker, like a map or a key." The rhythmic hum grew louder, almost resonating through the room. The camera feed began to pick up subtle movements around the edges of the coffin. The lining, once still, seemed to shift as if pushed by an unseen force. Dust particles in the coffin swirled gently, illuminated by the golden light. "What's causing that?" one researcher asked, panic creeping into their voice. Dr. Reed remained calm, her gaze unwavering. "It's a reaction. The tomb is responding to something. Our presence, perhaps. It was meant to be found." As the team watched, the central symbol in the glowing design began to pulse. With each pulse, the hum changed in tone, creating a sequence that felt deliberate, like a melody. The light inside the coffin grew brighter, casting soft reflections that danced across the walls of the lab. Dr. Hayes quickly scribbled notes, his voice trembling with excitement. "It's a language, not written or spoken, something else entirely. It's conveying meaning through light and sound." The team exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier skepticism replaced by awe and uncertainty. The coffin, once thought to hold only the remnants of the past, was revealing itself as something far more profound. A bridge between worlds, or perhaps even between times. Then, suddenly, the glow dimmed. The symbols faded one by one, leaving the coffin's interior bathed in the faint green of the camera's night vision. The rhythmic hum stopped, replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to press against the room. "What just happened?" one technician asked, breaking the tension. Dr. Reed took a step closer to the monitor, her expression unreadable. "It's waiting," she said softly. "For what, I don't know. But this isn't over." Before anyone could respond, the audio feed crackled briefly, and a faint voice-like sound emerged. It wasn't a voice in the traditional sense, no words were spoken, but the tone carried an unmistakable resonance. It was calm, deliberate, and filled with a sense of purpose. Dr. Hayes froze, his eyes widening. "It's acknowledging us." The realization sent chills through the room. The coffin wasn't just transmitting, it was interacting. The team had unlocked something ancient and deliberate, a message left by a civilization, or an intelligence, that had anticipated this exact moment. Dr. Reed straightened, her voice steady but filled with gravity. "We need to proceed carefully. Whatever this is, it's not just a discovery, it's a connection." The team stared at the monitor, their minds racing with questions. What had they just uncovered? And what would it mean for everything they thought they knew about life, death, and the universe itself? The lab was engulfed in silence as the team absorbed the gravity of what had just occurred. The coffin, once thought to hold only the physical remains of a man, had transformed into something far more, a vessel of communication, bridging an ancient mystery with the present. The faint voice-like resonance lingered in their minds, its tone calm yet profound, as though it carried a meaning beyond words. Dr. Reed finally broke the silence. "This is not just about history or science. This is a deliberate message designed to be unlocked at the right moment. The question now is, what do we do next?" The screen flickered again, pulling everyone's attention back to the monitor. The glowing symbols that had faded moments before began to reappear, but this time they moved with greater speed and complexity. The patterns shifted, forming what appeared to be a series of overlapping spirals. At the center of the spirals, the intricate symbol from earlier returned, pulsating steadily. "It's like it's recalibrating," Dr. Hayes murmured, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Adapting." The camera captured every detail as the symbols morphed into what looked like a diagram, circles intersecting lines, forming what could only be described as a star map. The pulsating symbol at the center aligned perfectly with a larger, glowing point on the map, as though marking a specific location. Dr. Reed stared at the screen, her mind racing. "That's not random, it's pointing to something." "But what?" a technician asked, their voice filled with awe. "A star? A planet? Dr. Hayes quickly analyzed the diagram, his fingers flying over the keyboard. These aren't Earth-centric constellations, they're from a different perspective, possibly from another system entirely. The implication sent a ripple of unease through the room. The tomb was not only revealing knowledge but also pointing to a connection far beyond the scope of human understanding. It was as though the message wasn't just for humanity, but for anyone capable of deciphering it. Suddenly the symbols began to fade again, their light dimming until only the central symbol remained. The hum returned, softer this time, its rhythm slow and deliberate. The golden light from the coffin flickered once, twice, and then disappeared entirely. The tomb was silent again. The lab was still as the team processed what had just unfolded. Dr. Reed spoke first, her voice steady but tinged with wonder. "We've uncovered something that changes everything. This isn't just a burial chamber, it's a message and an invitation." Dr. Hayes nodded, his gaze distant. "It's as if they knew someone someday would find this. That symbol. It's not just a marker. It's a destination." The air in the lab was heavy with questions, but one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. The discovery of the coffin had opened a doorway to something far greater than any of them had imagined. Somewhere in the vastness of the cosmos, an answer awaited, and now humanity had the key to find it.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.